you're going to be talking about mass incarceration used as a tool for social control. How does that tie into the war on drugs? And has the war on drugs, in fact, done more harm than good?
Yes, absolutely. It has. The war on drugs has really been the engine of mass incarceration. Within a 30-year period of time, our nation's prison population quintupled, which is extraordinary. The rate of increase in such incredibly short period of time, and much of that increase was driven by the war on drugs. For example, between 1985 and 2000, the period of our greatest expansion of our prison system, more than half of the increase in the state prison population and 2/3 of the increase in the federal prison population was due to drug convictions alone. You know, drug convictions have increased more than 1,000% since the drug war began. So this war on drugs really has been the mechanism by which young people, particularly young Black and brown men, have been targeted by the police, stopped, frisked, searched, arrested for, typically, minor, nonviolent, drug-related offenses, swept into the criminal justice system. And then once you're swept in, you're really trapped for life. Even if you're lucky enough to get just felony probation, you will acquire a criminal record that will follow you for the rest of your life and authorize legal discrimination against you in employment, housing, access to education, and public benefits. So this war on drugs has turned out to be less of a war on a substance or set of substances, and instead more of a war on a group of people defined largely by race and class, and it has served to relegate millions to a permanent second-class status, not unlike the second-class status occupied by African Americans in an earlier era.
Why do you think we as a nation are so concerned with punishing people for possessing marijuana or nonviolent crimes and putting them in prison for nonviolent crimes and things that aren't, as, I guess, violent as we, would think of other offenses? Why are we so focused on that in this country?
Well, it's interesting because we're not obsessed with punishing all people for minor, nonviolent, drug-related offenses. We're focused on punishing some people for those crimes, and who does time for these nonviolent drug offenses are overwhelmingly Black and brown, even though studies have consistently shown for decades that people of color are no more likely to use or sell illegal drugs than whites. Poor folks of color have been targeted at grossly disproportionate rates. In some states, 80 to 90% of all drug offenders sent to prison have been African American. So this punitive impulse hasn't been directed at all drug users. If you're white and live in a relatively privileged neighborhood and you possess marijuana, the odds are extremely small that you're going to be stopped and frisked and searched by the police. And even if you get caught with marijuana, the odds of you actually going to jail or doing prison time for that offense are, slim to none. But for people of color, the odds are high. And, what is that punitive impulse about? Our impulse to punish poor folks of color for these relatively minor crimes that go largely ignored, in other communities. I think that impulse, unfortunately, is linked to our racial history. It's due to racial stereotypes, anxieties, fears, and resentments that linger on and that we have not fully overcome, even as we elect our nation's first Black president, and all appearances, on the surface at least, suggest that we're moving in the right direction.